Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, Ukraine's president made concessions in crisis talks with the opposition, but the protests continue. Ukrainians explain why. Our digital producers, Malika Bala, I don't really need to tell you that. She's looking out for your online feedback. We kind of had to do this story because of how it started, right?
Exactly. Well, many would say that it started online. And so that's why we're seeing the rise of Facebook pages like this. I've pulled up on my screen, Euromaidan, which translates to European Square. These are setting records for numbers of likes, and this is a place where protesters are going to coordinate future protests and to assist protesters on the ground. Now, of course, this is a live conversation, and you can be in it. So tweet us your questions and your comments with #AJStream.
My name's Simon Adams. I prevent mass atrocities through working with the United Nations, and I'm in the stream.
Tensions continue to rise in Ukraine's capital as hundreds of thousands gathered over the weekend for another mass rally against President Viktor Yanukovych. It's been more than 4 weeks of protests at Kiev's Independence Square. Many Ukrainians are angry with their president for turning down an EU trade deal in favour of establishing closer ties with Russia. Despite his last-minute decision to pull back from the deal, EU officials say it's still on the table. In an attempt to resolve the political crisis, President Yanukovych offered some concessions in crisis talks with the opposition last week. He promised amnesty for protesters detained at Independence Square. That's a key opposition demand. He also suspended a security official and Kiev's mayor over allegations they pressured police into using force against demonstrators. So today we want to take you inside the protests and find out why, despite the concessions, Ukrainians continue to rally. To help us do that, we're joined via Skype by Andrei Shevchenko. He's an opposition member of parliament. In our Google Plus Hangout, we have Mustafa Nayem. He's an investigative journalist who's been credited with starting this protest movement. Maxim Zavinesky is founder of Watcher. That's an online magazine on business and social media. And Olga Anuk is Newton Fellow in Comparative Politics at the University of Oxford. She's been researching Ukraine's protest movements over the last several years. It's great to have you all here in the stream, everybody. Before we really get started, I have to say that we did reach out to the Ukrainian government, both in Kiev and the embassy here in Washington, D.C., but they couldn't join our discussion today. I'm going to start on my laptop looking at Independence Square. I'm going to play you some of this video. It is remarkable how many people are packed into that square. Andre, when was the last time you were there?
I was there yesterday before leaving for this distant city of Kani, where I am at the moment. We have a parliamentary by-election, so that's where I'm as of the moment. So but yesterday I was there. Take
me inside the square. What is the atmosphere like? What's happening with all those people packed in together?
Well, first of all, you will see thousands of people who stand for their rights. This atmosphere is very peaceful, very respectful. Every day the Maidan is full of thousands of volunteers who do a lot of job just to take care of the people around. 44,000 of hot meals are prepared a day to feed all the protesters, and another 15,000 hot meals are prepared during the night to feed the protesters who stay overnight. We see tents in this huge camp city. We also see barricades to protect the tent city from a possible police attack, and the atmosphere is incredible. It's people smiling, people singing, people dreaming together, but also people very committed to really defending their rights and defending their future.
So this sounds very romantic, people dreaming together. Mustafa, you're credited for actually having started the protest movement off. Let's go back to that EU trade deal though. That seemed to be the spark of the whole protest. What's happening right now with that?
You mean about this agreement, or what do you mean?
Yeah, with the EU trade deal. That seemed to start the whole protest movement off. But bring us up to date. Your government has said there have been some concessions. I'm just curious as to why people are still in Independence Square.
You know, it was just usual day when our parliament refused to adopt several laws about this agreement, and our government just stopped to prepare for signing of this agreement. And me and my friends just asked people, if you are not agree with that, just go outside and say that you are exist in this country. And the thing is that it's very symbolic day for Ukraine, because 9 years ago in 2004, exactly that day in the Ukraine started Orange Revolution. So these two emotions, when you're feeling that 9 years ago people went outside and they changed the country, and now you have a next chance and the next generation want to do the same thing. So now we know that this agreement is not signed, and it looks like they are not going to sign it, because we know that Yanukovych is going to Russia for negotiation, and on the other hand they had this using of police force against people on the streets when in Ukraine was guests Nuland and Ashton. So for me it's obvious that there's some tricky game when they're showing one things but doing another things.
So Olga, the question here that our community is asking, will they sign it, won't they sign it? What some members of our community that are tweeting into us are saying, actually it's about more than just this EU deal. There's a tweet here from Fel who says, Ukraine has become the new battleground for the East and the West. And when it's over, Ukrainians are the ones who'll suffer. And Olga, I want you to have a listen to this video comment who also, from someone who mentions that same sentiment.
What's the deepest fault line here in Ukraine? Is it between the eastern and western parts of the country? Not really. It's between our government and us, the citizens, the taxpayers. It's between our officials living bribe to bribe and us, ordinary Ukrainians, living paycheck to paycheck. It's about corruption, poverty, and depopulation. It's about police brutality, lack of transparency, and zero accountability. We're here to fix that.
So Olga, as he said in the video comment, it's about much more than just the deal. Could you elaborate on that?
No, absolutely. And this is what I wanted to actually jump in when Mustafa was explaining what the first few days and how much the protests have changed over time. So clearly this is now about defending your rights. What happened on the 29th of November, this illegitimate violence that was used against peaceful protesters, young students, and local and foreign journalists was just perceived by the general population as enough is enough. And while the majority of the population has grown in a more positive sentiment towards closer ties with EU, signing an association agreement with EU, it was really this overstepping of the boundaries of what is acceptable. And people noticed that it could have been anyone who was attacked. It could have been a foreign journalist who was screaming about their European passport, and it could have been a young student, a girl that was just embarking on her academic career. So I think this was really what has changed.
And if you allow me to jump in, it's not really about running away from Moscow, it's not about running away from Russia, but it's definitely about running away from the post-communist heritage, which this country is sick and tired of.
So let me just go back to this EU trade deal then, because here is Viktor Yanukovych, Ukraine president. He says in a quote that at the end of November, we will do everything to make Ukraine tougher in terms of economy. Once we are at a comfortable level, we will sign the agreement with the EU. Time will tell when this happens. Are you telling me, Andrei and Olga, that we've gone beyond this EU trade deal in terms of why people are out there in the street, Andrei?
Because for many people, this association agreement with Europe was a chance, it was treated as a chance to finally get out of this post-communist heritage. So it was a chance to get the country on the right track. And Yanukovych had been saying that he was going to sign the association agreement, and then 1 week before actually the signing, the ceremony, he said, or his administration refused to do so. So people really felt that they were robbed, that something was stolen from them. That's why the protest became so huge.
Of course, whenever we look at protests, we always want to know what protesters want. Mustafa, what do you actually want to happen?
You know, I think it would be a mistake if we say that people on the streets of Kyiv, they exactly know everything about this trade agreement or about this agreement, about the association. On the other hand, it would be a mistake to say that Ukraine now are deciding to west or the east. The thing is that new generation want to change the rule, and it was the chance to change the rule of life. I mean, they're saying the rich member of parliament, and they seeing their parents how they live. They see that it's not fear. So for them it was something like, you know, like New Year, and you're waiting that after New Year we're starting a new life. And then someone told them, please stop dreaming about that. It's not about that. Just we are living the same thing. And after that, when people went outside and it was peaceful demonstration, they beat them. And it was like symbol of all these protests, symbol of all these years of Ukraine, when you are saying something very peaceful, that please be fair, just we need independent courts, we need something new, or something that will change this system of government and in the relation with government and society, and they beat you. And
so Mustafa, here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing a mood. I'm not hearing what do you want to happen. You are protesting. What do you actually want to happen? I feel the mood. We're tapping into that perfectly. But what are you going to do? You're going to stay out there for months?
You know, I think you are the representative of our generation. We want some very fast victories, but it's not fast game. I think everything happened already. People change in Ukraine. They know that they can go outside and ask government to resign or ask something, and it is victory already. So I'm not sure that we need something exactly, for example, I don't know, food, or we need some victory of some candidate. We need the changing of rules. So it's not the protest of this month, of this year, it will be protest of this generation. And I hope that it will never end, I mean, in my life. So because we had it in 2004 during Orange Revolution, because after inauguration of our President Yushchenko, people went home. And we had what we had now. So we will not do that again. I think we will control our dream, which we are present now to Ukraine, into the world.
Malika.
Femi, you asked what protesters want. We're seeing that here on Twitter. El Haji says they want to impeach the president, dissolve government, and disband parliament by establishing a new democracy. Maxime, someone else on Facebook writes in, why doesn't the president hold a referendum on signing the association treaty with the EU? Is he too scared of losing power? So this referendum idea, Maxime, is that something that protesters are calling for, and is that something that's viable?
I think we do not want any because as for now, Ukrainian regime of Mr. Yanukovych doesn't allow to make any referendum because Andriy Shevchenko is now at election in one of Ukrainian cities, and we have 5 cities where elections are, and 4 of them Ukrainian authorities stolen victory from opposition candidates. So referendum isn't an exit for us, because we do not believe that it will be under the
right.
And I think, if you allow me to jump in, I think this demand to President Yanukovych to step down is the result of what he has been doing, because this man has completely lost his legitimacy as the head of state, with constant oppressing human rights and liberties, with this violent riot police on peaceful protesters, and with this terrible screwing up the signing of the association agreement with the European Union. So I think many people say, look, if you were promising, you have been promising to sign this agreement with the European Union. We have been believing in this European dream. If you can't do this, if you keep ordering your riot police to beat our students, then you should step down, and a different government will do your job.
So Olga, I heard you pipe up when I was talking to Mustafa about what do you actually want. I heard you just about to pipe up. What did you want to add?
Yes, I just wanted to add that what I hear Mustafa saying is that Ukrainians want the rules of the game to be changed. They want their democracy to be consolidated. And as Andrei said, this broken promise. In 2009, 2010, some voters in Ukraine thought they saw a different type of Yanukovych. Instead, what they've been shown time and time again, that he has broken promises. And when they have protested against some of these broken promises, there was violent force used against them. And I think that this changing the rules of the game is what Ukrainians seem to be wanting. But one thing I wanted to add is about success. And I remember when I was working with activists, including Andrei, actually, speaking about the Orange Revolution, a lot of people, journalists and activists, have told us that the Orange Revolution was part of an evolution, a democratic evolution of civic culture in Ukraine. And I think this is just another moment in this evolution of democracy in Ukraine. And really, it is truly successful that this many Ukrainians, after many observers have been saying that they are apathetic, that they will not go out and protest after the Orange Revolution because they've been so disappointed by that, went out and protest in such large numbers. And not only in Kiev, but all over Ukraine. And something that we haven't talked about today yet, in eastern Ukraine, in southern Ukraine, there are smaller Euromaidan.
What's relevant about that? Because we don't know the geography of Ukraine. Not all of us know the geography of Ukraine. What is relevant about those other regions that you mentioned? Why? Why did you mention
Well, for instance, I did a detailed process tracing of protest events during the Orange Revolution, and there really weren't any very, very small protest events in the east of Ukraine.
Right.
The east of Ukraine is also known to be more sympathetic both to Yanukovych, his party, and to closer ties with Russia. And in polls, far more negative towards closer ties
so just
to the EU.
summarize, because we're running out of time, this show goes so fast. Just to summarize, you're saying this isn't just about Kiev, this is actually a ripple movement that's going around Ukraine. Okay, got that. Malika.
Well, Olga just mentioned closer ties to Russia, and I want to pick up on that and the international interests that other parties have in this. Andrei, we have a tweet here from El Haji. He says Ukraine is susceptible to Russian pressure, and that's something a few of our community members are saying. Shuja says, if the Ukrainian president does sign the EU deal, Ukrainians better prepare for a very cold winter without gas supply from Russia. And Neslihan asks the question I think a lot of people are wondering, does having closer ties with the EU necessarily mean the collapse of strong economic ties with Russia? Are they mutually exclusive?
Well, according to many studies, there are some industries which might suffer from this Russian pressure or from these new conditions of trade with the European Union. That would include agriculture, but for many other industries that would mean a very strong and important benefits in the future. And I think it's very clear that for most of Ukrainians that would mean a more prosperous country in mid and long term period. And I think, which is much more important, it would mean rule of law. It would mean finally starting getting rid of corruption. It would mean respect to human rights. So that's what people really stand for.
You know what surprised me yesterday, and that was I was following the Ukrainian protests on Jazeera English, and then I saw a US senator, Republican senator, and also a Democrat senator get onto the stage and start talking to the audience. This is Senator John McCain's Twitter page, and here he's got video. My remarks at Euromaidan today, that was yesterday. So Olga, what's happening? There are sort of guest appearances from other people in the West on the stage in Kiev. Why is it drawing international, I don't know, how would I phrase it? So international interest. Why are people from around the world going to Kiev to support protesters?
I think this is citizens going out and defending their rights. And so often when we live in the West, and I have been privileged enough to be able to live in the West as well, and in the UK and England, in Canada and the US, we take things like a vote or peaceful protest for granted. And I think it's truly inspirational to academics and ordinary people in the West, as well as apparently Senator McCain, when almost 1 million people are in the streets protesting in sub-0 weather.
Also, just if you try to imagine this atmosphere, there is so much joy, so much dignity, so much readiness to sacrifice your time, probably your health and your life, and it's really incredible. I think many foreigners who come there, they fall in love with Maidan because they feel that this is the best that civil society could actually produce. And if you think about this 9-hour standoff with the riot police, which happened on the night of, in early morning of the 12th, 9 hours in freezing cold weather, when people physically were standing for their freedom, and the riot police was physically trying to push them out of the Independence Square. And when we saw thousands of people just physically staying without punching anyone, without a single shot taken, in a very peaceful atmosphere, but people would say, we have dignity and we are very committed to what we do. We'll just stand here because we feel it's important. So I think if you go there, there's no chances you wouldn't fall in love with this.
Okay.
Well, Femi, I think it's interesting you mentioned the U.S. senators that were there. One thing we're also noticing is that a lot of the tweets that we're able to see are happening in English. So there's a tweet here from Olga who writes in, social media has had a great impact. Ukrainians posted dozens of tweets per minute on the night of November 22nd and hundreds of tweets on the 30th during the crackdown. Now, Mustafa, of course, you're one of the ones who credit it with starting this all via a Facebook page. I pulled up another Facebook page. This is Euromaidan SOS, where organizers have taken to Facebook to provide medical and legal assistance for protesters on the ground. Tell us about that impact and why this is different than perhaps the protests in 2004.
You know, the main difference between 2004 and now, what's going on now, is that in 2004 it was organized by politicians. It's obvious they are not refuse it because in 2004 people went outside for victory of one man, of Viktor Yushchenko, and they know that was against the system and against of falsification. Now it started from civilians, and it's the thing is that they are not on the streets. They started this not because they are against something, but they was for something. So it's not the Euromaidan, it's not against Yanukovych or against opposition, it was for Europe. And now when they use police force and brutal force against protesters, it's obvious they are against government, and those demands about resigning, it's politician demands. But anyway, the main difference is that now people know that they don't need politicians to go outside. They don't need some organizing function. They can do it themselves. And if politicians will support it, it can be a huge protest like here. So it's a very, very important moment. The people, they feel that they are very now sure that they can do that.
Right. So when we started this conversation, we asked, why are Ukrainians still on the street rallying? There have been some concessions from the government. There may or may not be an EU trade deal signed. Olga, as you've been researching the protesters in Kiev and around Ukraine, can you answer that? Why are people still rallying?
Well, the results are preliminary. We've been surveying for about 2 to 3 hours every single day during the protest since the 22nd of November. And we have now just over 1,000 respondents. What we know is that very much what Mustafa already has said, this is about changing the way democracy and changing the lifestyles of ordinary Ukrainians. Absolutely, that seems to be the case. What is interesting, and just to touch on the social media discussion, while Facebook and Twitter and internet news sites have been very important in providing information to the protest participants, it seems that that itself doesn't mobilize people. So people that are more employing more Facebook and Twitter are not participating in protests more. That's a surprising fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm going to leave it for now, because we have some extra time, and that extra time is in the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Thanks to all of our guests, Andrei Shevchenko, Mustafa Naim, Maxim Savinevsky, Olga Onich. You will see them all again at stream.aljazeera.com. So good time to log off from your TV and log on to your computer if you're not there already. And Malika, final word from the community for the main show?
Well, I'll leave us with a prediction for our post show. Igor on Facebook says it's hard to make a prediction on how this is going to be resolved. Yanukovych may simply be playing the classic hard to get routine to try and get a better deal for Ukraine from either of the factions. So we'll see what our guests think about that.
To be continued. You can still be in the conversation. Just tweet us at #AJStream. And on the next show, we head to the Middle East, where Lebanon is known as a top destination for plastic surgery. But what does the popularity of going under the knife say about Lebanese attitudes towards beauty and body image? Stay with us. The post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com. We'll see you online. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streams Online Post Show. We've been talking about the protests in Ukraine and why, despite the concessions the president made in talks with the opposition, they still continue. So, where should we pick up on? I want to get back to Olga because you just threw in a little comment which was to be continued, Olga. Like social media, it kind of has a place, but it's not that big a deal. Expound on that, please, Olga.
First of all, I would like to make clear that social media has been very important, and our surveys are showing that people are using social media to become informed. This is incredibly important. It speeds up information channels. It seems to be having an important impact. But actually motivates people to go out and to protest is a personal invitation from a family member, a colleague, or a friend. So we've tried to test whether a Facebook invite is the same as a text message or a phone call from a friend. And it seems that the majority of people will not go out, majority, again, there are some that will, but won't go out unless they're being joined by a family member, friend, or colleague.
How did you test that, Olga?
So
Andrei, I hear you. I'm just going to ask sneak a little question in there first, and then Olga's all yours. Go ahead, Olga.
So we ask a variety of questions of where do you find your information about the protests and what brought you out today? Did you receive a text message? Did you receive a phone call? Did you speak to a colleague? Did you speak to a family member? Did you find the information on Facebook? Did you find the information on Twitter, Contacte, etc.? And we have a variety of questions to get exactly at that. And to my surprise, as much as yours and maybe my guest as well, it's overwhelming that the text messaging and the emails and the phone calls have been more important. So I think it's important for us to understand how social media work, and the information is incredibly valuable.
Andrei.
And before the show, I read a wonderful piece by Maxim Savanemsky, who wrote about this incredible role of social media in these protests. And he said that, well, life will never be the same in Ukraine for politicians and I guess for mass media. This protest started with a Facebook post by Mustafa, and during the violent police attack on November the 30th, I was tweeting from the Independence Square, and then I was surprised to see how many web publications, newspapers, and even broadcast media used my tweets. Then there is so much communication between the protesters through Facebook and through Twitter. So I think it's really, that was the time when the social media really exploded in Ukraine. So both in terms of communications and in terms of politics, life will probably never be the same.
Mustafa, can you remember what you actually posted on Facebook? Can you remember the exact words or close to the exact words?
Yeah, I remember. It was, I've seen that in Facebook. There was a lot of posts. People
a lot
was
of
very
anger and frustration.
Yeah, frustration, very angry, and then I just write that, okay, let's be serious. If you're really so angry, please just write that you are ready to go outside. Don't like this post, just write that you are ready. And during first hour I had almost 700 people that were ready, and the conditions were, if we would gather 1,000 people, we will go outside. And when it reached 700, I decided that it's enough. And
so
then
like
we posted that in
started the fire.
Yeah, at 10:30 we were on the Maidan and it started.
Wow. So what was the time between that first post and the time it started? How long did that take?
It was at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
You mean at what time exactly it was posted? It's at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
At 8 o'clock, and it was a rainy evening, and at 10:30 people went outside. So for 2 hours we did it. And at 11 or 11:30, we had almost 1,000 people on the streets.
Wow, I wish that many people paid that much attention to my Facebook post. Malika.
Well, Mustafa, you mentioned that anger, and I just got a tweet here from Olga who says, Ukrainians have never been so united as they are today. This is a fight against corruption and legal nihilism. But on the other hand, Neslihan asks a question that I think is a little bit pertinent for this discussion. She wants to know, protesting for Ukrainians happens to be an excellent way of being heard. We hear your anger and we sense it, but she wants to know, is Mr. Yanukovych really listening and paying attention? Mustafa, what do you think?
You know, maybe I would be okay. I will say not as a journalist, but it doesn't matter. The thing is that Yanukovych's time is end, and it's not politicians losing. The thing is that what is doing Yanukovych, he's not doing for him, because he's doing for our generation, for me, for my children. So it doesn't matter is he hear it or not, is he listen to us or not. The thing is that it's obvious that we will not accept these methods no more. And now it's not about is he listening or not listening. Is now the procedure, how we move this regime, how we move this system and shift the agenda to other things, to other rules, and that is important. So I don't care, listen here or not. I think he even doesn't know what is Facebook and he can't use it, and for here I think it's a very strange thing that someone in computer writes something and people went outside without money, without organizing. It's something, I think for him it's magic.
See, Mustafa, your phrase, I don't care whether he's listening or not, that doesn't sound like negotiation, that sounds more like revolution. Am I sticking my neck out too far here? What would you say?
You're not right, because the negotiation we have regarding negotiation, because it's peaceful, so it means that we are not going to do something illegal. And by law, Yanukovych is our president, and he was elected democratically, and so in the same way he will be moved. And it's obvious. No one is going to, I don't know, to use people against administration or to capture something. We are just waiting for our time, and time is very close.
If I could,
yeah, go ahead, Olga. No, go ahead.
If I could just jump, I think it's what Mustafa is saying is very important. On the one hand, it doesn't really matter if Yanukovych is listening, because the Ukrainian people have done something extraordinary. So ordinary people doing extraordinary things. But on the other hand, I think he's listening, and I think he's miscalculated tremendously, and I think there's a lot of people within his party and within his regime that are now trying to figure out how to get out of this mess. And perhaps too little too late is what Mustafa is saying.
I'm just going to bring in another voice into this mix, and this is from a protester against the protests, if you get my drift. This is from a member of parliament from the Guardian online website. I just want to play you an alternative perspective and then see what our guests make of it. Have a listen to this.
В основном народ, который проживает на восточной части Украины. Это в основном шахтеры, горняки, рабочие. Это те люди, которые действительно поднимают внутреннюю экономику нашего государства. В это непростое время отставлять правительство – это неправильно. Это усугубление кризиса. Поэтому мы за поддержку правительства, которое на себя берет ответственность за эту ситуацию.
So support there for the government. Andre, you're a member of parliament, so this is one of your colleagues in parliament. I want to get our audience to have a sense of how big is this protest? Does it spread around the whole of Ukraine? Is it just for young people? Or is most of Ukraine really upset with their government?
Well, first of all, as of the European perspective, the recent polls show that about 60% of Ukrainians support closer ties with the European Union, comparing to 30% favoring the customs union with Russia. So it's 2-to-1. And I think for the first time in the Ukrainian history, we have very clear dynamics which shows which direction the country is heading. Now, when it comes to the government and specifically to Yanukovych, I think his ratings are historically lowest. And both in the western and in the central Ukraine, where he has never been popular, but also in the east, it's more than 50% of people strongly disagreeing with his policy. So I think we have two very specific reasons for people to go on the streets. First, it's the desire for the European integration, and second, it's this anger and frustration with the Yanukovych policies. So we see the combination.
Right. So Maxim, you've been very quiet, listening intently. Have we missed anything out that you feel is really important that you want to add before we wrap up the conversation?
Could you please repeat?
Yeah, sure. Maxim, anything that you wanted to add? You've been listening very intently. What have we missed?
I want to add about social media, because I think that impact of social media is very huge for this period in Ukraine, because many people are on the streets and they post on Facebook, on Twitter information about streets in the central part of Kyiv, in other cities, and their friends, their family see this information, photos, messages, and they joining people on streets.
Right.
And it's very, very interesting, and I think we didn't have any experience in history.
So thank you to Maxim, to Olga, to Mustafa, and to Andre. I've got a feeling if the way that Mustafa's been talking about these protests is actually accurate, we're going to be talking about these protests again on the stream, or at least online. Thank you very much for being part of this conversation. Let me leave the last comment to our online community.
What
do they say?
Actually picks up on what you just said from someone who left us a video comment who says, we're in this for the long haul. Have a listen.
I don't think that protesters' demands will be met in the meantime, because Yanukovych is not the president who will listen to his people. He's rather a classical example of a dictator, and he has so much to lose. So both the political crisis and protests will continue in Ukraine, because people are so much fed up with president, his administration, the parliament majority, and they will fight for as long as needed.
Some strong words there, but she says the protesters will fight for as long as needed.
Okay, we will be watching from a distance and online as well. Let's take a look at what we're doing on the next show, where we head to the Middle East, where Lebanon is known as a top destination for plastic surgery. But what does the popularity of going under the knife say about Lebanese attitudes towards beauty and body image? We will find that out in the next AJ stream. Until then, we'll be online. Take care.